Hmm. Some interesting story there. Reese's Pieces, Reese's Cup. We're not gonna stop. We're not sorry. Well, let me tell you the story I just told my house manager. I explained to him that uh, after he had a recording of some people vindicating and validating how a hobo had a fantasy world in this sci-fi flick into which he was uh, moving in and out of. Sounds like a hobo with a book that gets lost in the book because he's got nothing better. But I've told him about a book I read once. It was the first book I read after learning I could read in Durango. Um, Actually, I read Michael Crichton's Rising Sun first. This is, by the way, after never having read a book from front to back. First book was Michael Crichton. Second book was the woman who uh, uh, was the author of a book called The Eight, a very famous book. But this book was called The Third Identity. It started out with a man who woke up in a bathroom stall and dressed up like a hobo with no memory of his life. Well, he figured that doesn't make much sense because he looked down at his hands and figured out, well, certainly never been a hard laborer. And my hands look like a prissy boy who goes to the spa all the time. Very clean hands. It's the message, the signal to him that something didn't make sense. He couldn't just be a hobo. But I used that to jump off his story that I was being exposed to, and then pointed out an ironic situation of how I experienced a weird thing. When I was down in Florida, I tried to pay a man off to shoot me because I was tired of fighting in a situation, being a hobo, and being made to think I caused a whole bunch of gangster shit to go down because somebody told me Hillary Clinton was using prostitutes, and that was how Trump may have gotten some undercover help by the Pentagon as to knock out Hillary. Because I just kept snitching because everyone was putting me in a very bad position. Even though I knew something deeper than that was taking place. Invariance as to how man could trust its superpower communistically, defensively, and offensively on a mega scale. But I explained to him, in my situation, I was selling gyros um, in Newport after nearly getting frozen to death by a fishing crew, which I was originally supposed to be with the young guy who smokes pot and gets tuna on the nice boat, but then they stuck me with a bunch of slack-jawed killers who were ex-heroin addicts and acted like a bunch of yokel locals. Couldn't figure out how to act polite or be decent. This is all the way up in northwest area. Um, so I took the gyro job. Wound up calling a Muslim Brotherhood member who was just in the Muslim Brotherhood to protect his prejudice circumstances here in America. A pedophile for probably doing what he did to me, to his wife, and isolating a 5-year-old child for himself. I mean, maybe she was a crazy woman and such and so forth, and leveraging female rights in a world into which they came from a Muslim culture. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? On my way down from the Strawberry Festival, calling this guy out like maybe he might be the next Woody Allen for all I know. Or maybe interconnected with American gangsters. Like the fishermen who tried to put me on the boat where they could freeze my body and throw me into the sea, and I picked up on that real quick. I know this all sounds like my paranoia, but if you lived my life, you know it wasn't. Anyways, um, I found a job at a place called Two Heads, delivering oil, growing pot, and surprisingly enough, I was going to be given this job on my birthday. So my first reaction was, oh, hot diggity, I got a week before I gotta start work. Gotta go get my license, and I gotta go tell that sweet woman down near Newport who made me a sandwich and treated me right. Hey, I got a good job 2 hours north of here, and I'm more than happy to come see you from the bus, kind of, and start a relationship. Well, I couldn't find her house after that. It was pretty close to the beach town. I thought I could re-find it visually. I didn't know her address or her number, because it was supposed to just be a passerby kind of situation that I couldn't really do much about, even though I liked her a lot. I thought maybe it would be nonsensible to get her number because I probably wasn't going to be able to do much about it, or I probably might not even be anywhere near her once I do figure out how to get an income. But something worked out, and then it didn't. After not finding her, the last thing I can remember is wandering around on the beach, feeling like daggone it. Well, at least I got the job. Who knows? Maybe I'll find her again tomorrow, somehow, some way. I still could find where she worked, which was much further down the street. But that's where I met her. Anyways, long story short, I woke up a month and a half later in a Newport hospital bed, being told that the nurse's best recollection of how the hell it's been a month and a half, and I was nowhere near the beach, was that somehow I was staging a protest reported to the police by the people at Best Buy as having had gone in there looking for twine to hang myself with and staging a protest. That's all that the information they could be given. Um, the cops said they cut me down after I successfully climbed a tree and hung myself. And when I got to the hospital, my blood was tested at 2 point something alcohol level. Now, I'm not sure if that makes any sense because at the time I was not over drinking by quite, the most I drank was 4 beers watching the World Cup in Boulder before I got out to the coast. I was smoking a fair bit like I usually do. And Oregon had a lot of options for smoking, and people would give it just right out to you. But they said for some reason, even though I had no money, I figured out how to get so much liquor and so much of it into me. And hours after they could test for my alcohol limit, it was still a shockingly deadly dose. I don't know if that's very possible for most people to get to 2 point something, let alone stage a protest, let alone not get locked up, let alone be given twine from a group of Best Buy people somehow, and then have them try to save my life by calling the cops who cut me down, found me somewhere 2 hours later. By the grace of God, I stayed alive because apparently whoever hung me didn't do it right, or at least didn't use thick enough rope, unto which I was still getting breaths in. I don't think when they cut me down they figured I was alive because my whole body was purple. But they took me to the hospital because they figured out somehow my heart was beating. Who'd have thought? And once they put me on life support and yada yada yada, um, I was given the story by them. That's the case. After about another month of consciously staying and keeping with it, getting my voice back, getting everything back, I left the hospital and having to walk around the area for the homeless stuff I needed. I came back to the hospital saying I can't breathe. I can't walk more than a quarter mile with a backpack on without stopping. I don't know how I'm supposed to survive out here with that. They're like, "Oh, Mr. Complaining Pants, huh? Not appreciative of our life savings, huh?" Well, they got me a surgery with a vocal cord and throat specialist, surprisingly, in 3 days. But apparently, in those 3 days, they were worried I was going to be Mr. Complaining Pants again. And they performed a tracheotomy, leaving me with this mark, which, no matter where I go in America, everyone rudely asks me about, deliberately knowing they're setting me off. But when a Norwegian with a fat, ugly bitch from Texas who asked me about it, and I explained the story in front of the Norwegian, very rational, intelligent European man there for Mardi Gras and to fuck some ugly, fat hippo bitch. Um, I explained to him and broke down how illogical the story was. And she was like, "Well, maybe you were just drunk." I was like, "Shut up, you fucking fat American whore. You telling me not to snitch because you're a fucking nigger? I don't give a fuck about your shit, bitch." By the way, the N-word is how I refer to the dark black souls of America. But it's a Spanish term as to a color, which isn't a color, by the way. Um, but the Norwegian realized what I had just broken down in front of her face, as I did anyone who's watching. But the irony and the funny point of this and the conversation I had with Devin was, it may sound like some secret agent bullshit, but I was a hobo before and a hobo after. So it's kind of funny. Either way, if you haven't been able to logistically break down how I didn't hang myself, now they thought they could get away with it because for a second in time, I paid off a guy to shoot me in Miami on the way down because I really didn't feel like being stuck in a hobo's life and the life of a man who's clearly a liability to a bunch of COVID individuals who know what they have been doing for a very long time to keep up the war on terror, which came to their country, COVID style, because that's the only way the enemy could fight back. They think the only way the enemy can fight back is a terrorist attack. Oh, what about secret agent terrorists who aren't looking for espionage information, just to punish as many civilians as humanly possible, rape their children, who knows what. But, anyways, aside from that, you know, like those Canadians who put me in a bad position. That's how you know he's from Canada. French Canada. Anyways, after all this, I came back to Maryland to live with Dave, the guy who was trying to show me interspitting clips of the Nazis' conception of things while looking at early 90s footage of rock and rollers on MTV. Bizarrely enough, he recorded all his other programming accordingly to the programs they were. Working for a Frenchman who retreated after we went into the war in Iraq, came back 2 years later. That's when I met him and first started working for him, as well as that terrorist negotiator, because they were neighbors for me. And he needed help taming his backyard after leaving it to be for 2 years in France to deal with what it was about to happen. Now, I don't know why he was so scared we went into Iraq. He explained to me, we have very tiny TVs in France. You have very big TVs. That was the thing he originally told me when I first started working for him. And the second time I started working for him, he told me, I didn't know. What could we do? What could I do? The French, they love Iraq. They were our friends. So, by the way, it was all built off of the puppet democracy. We were checking because it didn't work out communistically through a puppet game, created a democracy to put in a minority group at the time, or the majority group. I forget which Sunni or Shiites are based off of royal descendants of minorities with wealth, as opposed to the Majaz or majority one. I don't have a memory of all that stuff anymore because of how badly you guys have figured out a way to stop me from self-educating myself as I once did. Which really wasn't a bunch of classified, top-secret, unredacted journals of stuff that even the highest levels of our CIA can't read unredacted accounts of anymore. It was mostly actually intellectually based documentaries, mostly after the age of 18. Anyways, but you find more out from those actually. Most of the stuff that goes into me being able to put together everything, it comes from perfectly well documented, open, free market, free journalists uh, who have made very powerful, real documentaries, which can't be classified by anyone. In a situation into which, again, his neighbor, an MP from Brazil, who claims he was forced into the army, and his wife, who speaks 5 languages and has herpes, and didn't like me very much when I kept staring at her herpes when it came up. Whose children say their real dad lives in Brazil. And I was like, no, your dad's right over there. Anyways, I guess they were confused about how to say he lives in or I'm from. Or things are just getting sketchy. But he told me he was in Portland around the time I was in the hospital knocked out. Just before my birthday hit and I got that job. And I'm not sure if he was trying to get me in trouble for theoretically being able to get in trouble with the local cops for maybe not being in Maryland, even though clearly they keep trying to run false methods to, arrest me inappropriately while I'm there, while I'm trying to not break my warrant. So it's sort of a balance scheme. It's like, do I leave Maryland and not leave any evidence I left Maryland, or do I stay in Maryland and allow them to functionally place me into another false arrest, breaching my probation? I don't know. It's weird. Some are trying to do a lighter-hearted sabotage. Some are trying to snuff me out. One could get them all in a lot more trouble than the other, and one could be a lot less difficult to break down as being clearly wrong or clearly a conspiracy. But ultimately, after talking with my house manager and explaining to him, not all these details I'm explaining to you in terms of what happened after that, but simply, how did I get the rope if I was 2 point something? How was I talking making up a good reason to commit suicide. Why did they give me the rope? How did they not get to the cops soon enough? Under which, at some point, this drunk, I was able to climb a tree and hang myself. And it took 2 hours for the cops to cut me down, which the Best Buy people must have talked to, and I must have figured out how to get the string and figured out how to uh, make them give me the string. And they figured out how to report to the cops I was about to go kill myself with the string they gave me. And the cops then couldn't find me for 2 hours after I climbed a tree successfully and pulled this whole shenanigan off. Whoever hung me, I'm sure didn't expect me to live. Cops, I'm sure, were shocked I lived. And the Army MP who happened to be there at the time was probably scared shitless to see me at his neighbor's house again. But the thing that creeped him out the most is when I was like, dude, you know the guy who I know you don't know. I've only been talking to Dave about how he may have been a French spy, based on my history with him. Certainly didn't like Americans, even though his children are Americans. Certainly didn't like Jews, even though his wife was a Jew, his kids are Jews. Didn't like black people, even though he loved his black African neighbor. Whatever. I explained to him that Robert did a old school chimpanzee methodology on me by trying to touch my nipples. It's what the chimps do. The French understand how we're still basically just chimps. And even though Conan O'Brien pointed out our chimp won, when I saw him use this chimp technology on a 5-year-old girl because she was wearing a blue owl shirt with eyes where her nipples are, and he went all the way to swipe her nipples by acting like he was making a cute limerick about the eyeballs on her shirt. I had to come to Pedro to tell him, you might not want to leave him with your children anymore, because he might be working his way into taking advantage of your most isolated character. The older one, he knew, I guess that probably wouldn't make sense with the younger one talked a lot, but the middle one was very shy, and I saw him flat out swipe her nipples the same way he was trying to play chimpanzee with me. And I realized that girl couldn't speak for herself because she was the way she was. Very shy, very quiet. And if he did ever want to do something, he could probably uh, handle her. And I explained to Pedro and his wife, as a social work student, I understand the psychology of how predators work in those circumstances very, very well. Um, we have to. If we don't, then we can't identify what's going on. So, ultimately, I explained to him, your middle one is the weakest. I think he might be trying to, you know, make her feel like something, because he actually touched her deliberately on the nipples and swiped. He didn't just point at him and touch him, he swiped. Um, yeah, so uh, after his wife was sort of like, okay, you can leave now, I stuck around because they clearly didn't believe me at first. But I went back down. I was luckily cutting things off with Robert because I was supposed to be starting to work with a landscaper. But that didn't work out because he scheduled me for a job at my uncle's house, who's a Jew convert Italian that my aunt got to join the Episcopal Church. Maybe he was Catholic, but I'm pretty sure I heard my parents whisper one time. we're converting him out of Judaism, actually. Um, anyways, I mean, it was what he wanted to do because, you know, he was now growing up down the street from the church with my family that I'd gone to for a while, marrying my aunt, so I guess it just made sense to him. I don't know. He's the guy that falsely identified me as needing medication for bipolar because he didn't realize I was partying a fair bit. Also the guy that sabotaged me because I brought a couple friends over to drink a couple beers in my room once when my parents were gone. In my opinion, clearly running his own COVID situation on the fam. But, you know, now I'm starting to sound like maybe I am delusional. But it's funny how people run these games for various reasons. And various bad coincidences make you wonder if something wasn't a coincidence. But ultimately, when Google tells me I'm going to my uncle's neighbor's house and I go there because it's a paid job dealing with snow shoveling, and I wind up finding out that's the address of my uncle, and the point on the map was wrong. I didn't know my uncle's literal address because I don't pay attention. And he's threatening me not to come to his house, even though he knows what he's doing. Everyone knows they're all wrong, and he has no right to fucking do that. And the boss I met in front of the Home Depot sends me on this first thing to tell me he's there to shovel paths around his yard, justifying the fact that it was all made up bullshit. Blows my mind. You know, I knew what was up, so I walked down the street and forced my boss to come all the way there and showing him, I'm not doing anything wrong as your new employee, but I must inform you that's my uncle's house and he doesn't seem to want me to come around. Told me this after he bought me a cigar and identified me as bipolar again in public, even though I wasn't taking my medications at the time, even though they rationalized them because I was suicidal and tried to hang myself. Yeah, right. Anyways, so after identifying this guy, who Nomi identified as a guy who takes his Russian daughter privately to work with him every weekend, similar to how my real estate manager or renter takes his daughter into the attic every weekend, above my head while I'm there. Again, I can't play secret agent man with suspicious everything when clearly I don't know the context of the situation. All I know is he still utilizes that third floor to have a time with his daughter because it's closer to where his ex-wife is, apparently. And ultimately, you have a consistency of weird situation after weird situation after weird situation of me being in the middle of a bunch of assholes prosecuting each other for variables that they've only displayed to me as being suspicion and forcing me to be the guy to be ambitious with their suspicions. Ultimately, what we know is that day is a cop came, but I was far down the street, so he couldn't do anything about me being near my uncle's house, which I had not walked onto, which they couldn't justify any problems through. But I called my manager and said, well, I'm sorry, your first client's my uncle. He doesn't want me around, especially after I told him, you guys are in deep shit for trying to lock me in that bomb shelter, and you know it. I'm proving it. I explained to my granddad's old neighbor, who's the Frenchman, that that's most likely the case now, and that they just tried to set me up for another false arrest in a situation where I didn't break the law, and I was just trying to do my job, make some money. And I got to tell him this because I did start working again for Robert, despite his grotesque acts, which I knew were illegitimate, even though I'd warned the MP, who was in New Orleans at the time, of my hanging, suspiciously enough. They took a slight sabbatical onto the base for a couple of weeks, realizing I was right. Which made me happy because I was talking to Dale. I was like, those sons of bitches, just because they are part of hanging me, they ain't going to do the right thing and let that sweet little girl become a lipstick lesbian because some nasty old man's touching her and angry at her daddy for being a part of the Iraq War. Well, gosh dang it. This is country. I'm done with this. Um, so you have to tread lightly when nobody is helping you, and you explain this to a Norwegian in Mardi Gras, and a woman is telling you to stop snitching on America, even though I've convinced him the only reason she's shutting me up is because I'm right, and she knows it. How she knows it, beyond my belief, too. Meaning, these guys are running all sorts of games. Now, I know none of this makes sense because you just got confused by how many intercrude dots. Must be a delusion because of how many suspicions and conspiracies I just broke down, which can't be interconnected. But it's all true, guys. It's all true. My house manager said, "Ooh, well, that's some very deep philosophical thought," and laughed and walked away.